This last week we kind of brought up for a couple weeks now we've brought up the idea about legacy, right? This is our church's 100-year anniversary, and so legacy is a big part of what's on my mind. Where we're going to be, where have we been, and we all have a legacy. As people, as a church, everybody has a legacy, and Satan wants to destroy our legacy, but that begs the question: what? What is a legacy? I've been talking about legacy a lot. What is it? What is this thing? Well, when you think about people, when you think about anybody, you think about the actions that they've done, huh? I mean, you don't just think objectively about a person. You think about the things that they've done. For instance, if you found out that I was doing drugs, it would alter your perception of me, wouldn't it? When you see me with how I deal with my kids, it will alter your perception of me, either for better or for worse. When you think of people like these people on the screen, Billy Graham, for instance, you are probably going to think about his crusades, or you're going to think about his wisdom. He wrote a lot of books. His whole family wrote a lot of books. Or when you think about people like Ravi Zacharias, the second guy in the picture, you're either going to remember his Christian books and how much he wrote to encourage Christians in their faith, or you're going to remember his adultery. When you think of the third man, Bill Gothard, you're going to probably either think about all of his teachings, he had a lot to say about authority, or you're going to think about that scandal a couple years ago, probably 15 years ago now, where he was accused of some things with authority abuses. See, when we think of people, we don't just think about people, we think about their actions. But if you watch on the media, legacy becomes a little more complicated because movies and all this stuff, they talk about your legacy as though it's some quest to become immortal, right? They used to talk about like statues and stuff. What was left behind? If you're a fan of comic books, right? Batman. What is Batman's legacy in Gotham City? Maybe they don't use the term becoming immortal, though. Maybe they just say, how will you be remembered? And so in a lot of movies and books, they'll talk about, well, you will live on in the lives and in the hearts of those who you touched. And that sounds good, but what happens when those who remember us die? Is our legacy therefore ended? And so we're going to be looking at legacy today, modeling a lot from Job's legacy, and let's kind of move on from there. Now, without knowing all the details, many people know the basics of the book of Job. There's a righteous guy, and he suffers unfairly. Okay, all right, got that. But before Job starts his suffering, the heart of the book of Job, God defines Job's legacy. And he does so in chapter 1, verse 8. It says this, "Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? No one else on earth is like him, a man of perfect integrity who fears God and turns away from evil.'" So God here is defining what Job's legacy is. Now, what does that mean, that whole integrity and all that stuff? What does that actually mean? Well, it meant that he was above blame. It does not mean that he was sinless. Okay? Job was not a sinless man. He was a sinner, but he was above reproach. He was a person in good standing. He didn't live boldly in sin. He was treating other people well, and he was doing the right thing. You know what I mean? When you think of somebody who's a problem maker, Job would not have been the person. And it's not just in the eyes of the community, but in the eyes of God. So Job's legacy wasn't something he had done in the past, right? Like people weren't coming up to him and saying, Job, you're that guy that did that one thing, right? You don't see that happening. And when you move on here, let's look at some of it. It says Job 1:5, for instance. It says, "Whenever banqueting was over, Job would purify his children, offer burnt offerings early in the morning." This was Job's regular practice, not something that he used to do, something that he was doing. Okay, whenever these things were done. Okay, then you go on to chapter 1, verse 22. "Throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything." What Job was doing. Present tense. Job 2:10. "Should we accept only good from God and not adversity?" Throughout all this, Job did not sin in what he said. So you see this resounding theme with Job's legacy. It's not something that he did back in the day. It's not some, statue he built in honor of himself. No, it's something that he is currently doing. Not something he was doing, something he is doing. So when we look at legacy, we've asked the question, what is legacy? We can now answer, our legacy is this. It's what we are doing now. Our legacy is what we are doing now. What God is saying about you now. What people are saying about you now. It's not about something you did in the past. It's not about something you will do in the future. It's what you're doing now. And you might say, now hold on. That would mean our legacy dies with us. Hold on, we'll get to that in coming weeks. Just hold on. So what are we doing now to love God and love people and serve both well? Now, for Job, what was Job doing? He was interceding. He wasn't wasting his time. He was interceding for people. And we're going to get more into that. But Job didn't have the idea of retiring. He wasn't resting in the past. See, for some of us, we do something good and then we just kind of, well, I've done my good deed in life, And then for other people, you get in what's called a retirement mindset. And what that means is, now that I have finished my professional job, I'm just pretty much checking out of life. I'm not really, And that's not really a good idea to get into. Not only is it shown that you're going to die sooner if you do that, but also you still have life to live. You still have, purpose. And Job was a witness, even in the midst of all these different things. Look at Job 3-4. Indeed, you have instructed many and have strengthened weak hands. This is one of his friends talking to him. Your words have steadied the one who was stumbling and braced the knees that were buckling. This is not someone who's living uncaring about people. He didn't have that retirement mindset. When you think of Job, you get this picture in your head of somebody who is graceful, not snide. You don't imagine Job going off on these rants and tangents and tearing people, tearing people's chest out. You have this image of this guy that's just real graceful in his speech. He's loving and serving people. He really just seems to have things in, his ducks in a row, if you will. So let's kind of shift gears here. We've kind of looked at legacy. Let's kind of tie some things in. Because, Job was married. But there's some interesting things, and don't laugh yet. I haven't said the funny bit. I haven't even gotten there yet. But there's some things happening here that are a little bit curious. Job was married, but at the beginning of the book, it doesn't say, now there was a couple who was righteous who lived in the land of Uz. It says, now there was a man who lived in the land of Uz, and he was righteous and blameless and all that stuff, right? No mention of the wife. Then Satan is talking with God, and God brings up Job, and he never brings up Job's wife. And Satan doesn't even bring up Job's wife. Now you can laugh. What is going on there? I mean, this is... In fact, you don't even know that this guy has a wife, except for the fact that he has kids, and you're like, oh, maybe she's dead or something. But no. You keep going, and it turns out that she's there just ready to say something snide. And then she's not mentioned again for the rest of the book. What is going on here? Why? Well, we've talked about legacy, and I think this is important because Job shows us not one person's legacy, but two people's legacy. Actually, more than that, but we'll get to that at the end. See, Job was married, but his wife is not discussed by Satan or by God, and the book is not called Job's wife. It's not called Job and his wife. In fact, tell me what Job's wife's name is. Nobody knows because she's not mentioned. Her name is just Job's wife. So, we live in a modern audience, so let's answer modern questions. Maybe it's because of the patriarchy, right? Patriarchy. Maybe it's it's a man's world and women are just being excluded here. Okay, all right. Maybe the Bible is an inherently sexist book. That it is something that she was overlooked just because, it was a man's world. I don't think so. And I'm not just going to say I don't think so. I have reasons for why I don't think so. But we're going to kind of look through them. And so let's kind of take the scenic route here and just say Job's legacy was not her legacy. The reason why she's not mentioned has nothing to do with sexism or the patriarchy or anything like that. It's because Job's legacy was not her legacy. And you might say, well, what are you saying? Something very, very important that I wish I could say better. So I will try to use more words where I can't use the right words. what I mean by her legacy was not Job's legacy is what happened, what's going on before the troubles come, before all the problems that Job faces, what's going on? Well, when we look at Job's wife, what was she doing? Nothing. She wasn't doing anything. And this isn't a jab on women, just FYI. Okay, we're contrasting a righteous person with a less than righteous person. We're not contrasting men with women, just so that we're all on the same page. Okay, all right, we're good. All right. Don't want people thinking that. But what's Job doing? You know, she's doing nothing. But what's Job doing? Well, let's look at Job chapter 1, verse 1. This is before the problems come. There's no problems yet at this point. Well, I'm sure that normal problems. There was a man in the country of Uz named Job. Okay. He was a man of complete integrity. So what was he doing? He was being a man of integrity. He was living living with integrity. He was living with integrity. So what happened when the troubles came? Because that was before the troubles came. She was just kind of living life, and he was trying to live life loving and serving well. Okay? All right, but what happened when the troubles came? Because sometimes troubles will give you that push, that kick in the butt to go, seek God. Maybe that's what's happening here. Well, Job's reaction is pretty much the same thing he was doing before. 120 says this, Then Job stood up, tore his robe, and shaved his head. He fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I will lead this life. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. This is Job's response to all these bad things happening and his children dying. And then you hop down even further to chapter 2, and this is his response to losing his health as well as all of his belongings and his children, and then having his wife be snide with him. This is his response to all of that. Should we accept only good from God and not adversity? These are some powerful statements here, okay? So you see, before the troubles, what Job was doing, and after the troubles, what Job's reaction was. But what about the wife? So if the wife wasn't doing anything real notable before the troubles, after the troubles, we see the wife's reaction in chapter 2, verse 9. Look at this. His wife said to him, Are you still holding on to your integrity? Not our integrity. You know how sometimes when you're married, it's like, when you're first married, I should say, your burdens become each other's burdens. So it's not your sickness, it's our sickness. Right? When your wife has the morning sickness from being pregnant, it's not your morning sickness, it's our morning sickness. That goes away after a couple of years. But when you're first married, it's what's yours and mine is ours and all that, But here, there's no talk about our integrity. There's nothing there. She's just like, are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die. So this is her reaction. And then what does she do for the rest of the book? She gives him the silent treatment because he said we should receive the good and the bad together. She didn't like that. So she doesn't say anything for the rest of the book. And then Job's friends come and they start kind of beating him up verbally, and she keeps her mouth shut. She's like, you dug your grave, Job, you can sleep in it. Or die in it, whatever. I'm mixing my metaphors. But when we read stuff like this, we ask that question deep in our loins. How would I respond in these times of troubles that Job was going through? How would I respond in this? Well, I think that question is a lot simpler than we make it. What are you doing now? See, before the problems came for Job, what was he doing? He was interceding. After the problems came, what was he doing? He was still doing the same thing. You can know how you would respond in that kind of a situation by what you're doing now. Are you just kind of zoning out in life? Or does your life have purpose? Do your finances have purpose? Does your time and minutes have purpose? Does your job have purpose? Does your life have purpose? These are important questions. How are you responding now to these setbacks? Job's reaction came out of his heart. Matthew 12 says this, either make the tree good and its fruit will be good, or make the tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you are evil? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. So what was Job's wife's legacy? It wasn't anything good, was it? Because what came out of her mouth? Curse God and die. But what about Job? What was his legacy? It was good. Because when it was pressed, what came out? Something good. Something good came out. a good person produces good things from his storeroom of good. And an evil person produces evil things from his storeroom of evil. I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word that they speak. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and I wish we could spend more time there, but let me just say it in a simple way. Your mouth reveals your heart. So we can know how we would respond, and also, Job's response was pretty obvious because of what was inside, what he had stored inside. What are we storing inside? Now, maybe another way of saying that would be if your heart is bad, your legacy will inherently become bad. You cannot possibly live a good legacy, when you are storing evil. Now, Job wasn't sinless. That is not the point of the story, and you will not be sinless. But your legacy is what you're doing now. And this is why I say that. Because your legacy is not the mistakes you've made. Okay? Have you ever thought maybe the wife had this moment where she said, you know what, I've already messed up. There's no point in me trying. Maybe you start the book off as Job's wife and you want to become Job. That's all right. There's not like a one try and that's it. You didn't spend your coin, you know. Your legacy is not your perfection. You don't see Job saying, wife, who I love, God brought up my name in conversation, not yours. So how about you make me a cup of tea? You don't see him resting back and saying, look at my perfection. You know what I'm saying? And you don't see, you sadly don't see her saying, I've made mistakes. I want to do something different here. And your legacy is not what people think of you either. I mean, look at Job's friends. They had some very mixed opinions. It's like when you read the ratings of new movies, the audience opinion was mixed. Your legacy is not the successes that you had yesterday. None of that is your legacy. In good times or bad times, whether you're alone or surrounded, if you're struggling or if you're not struggling, what are you doing now? That is your legacy. What are you doing now? See, when Job was surrounded by all these problems, what is he doing? He's crying out to God. He's crying out to God. Same thing he did before he got sick, before he lost all these things. So God brought up, going back to the thing about Job's wife, God brought Job up because of his legacy, right? Look at my servant Job. He is doing something good, okay? But here's the thing. Satan left Job's wife alive because of her legacy. You see the difference? Satan could have killed her, couldn't he? Didn't God say that he could do that? He killed all the kids. He could have killed the wife too, but he left her, knowing what was in her heart. How did he know what was in her heart? Because she'd been living it. How did Satan know what was in God know what was in Job's heart? Because he had been living it. See, God brought up Job to Satan because of his legacy, but Satan left the wife alive because of her legacy. She could have been his biggest source of encouragement, but she didn't support him at all, and she didn't defend him at all. At all. Very important things. Now, once again, this is not a jab against husbands and wives, okay? This is a jab against what our legacy can be. That's it. Okay? So if all you're taking out of this is, some snide thing about your spouse, you're missing the point entirely. Okay? If all you're getting from this is that you're more righteous than your spouse, you're definitely missing the point entirely. Now, maybe they had the world's greatest marriage before this all happened. I kind of doubt it. Maybe they had the world's best marriage after this happened. I really doubt that. But, miracles happen. But when the unexpected came either way, she wasn't there. That was a legacy of not being there. She could have done something different. She didn't. It's like when you start a new diet for the new year, right? You're already laughing. And it's all going good, except for like day 2, it really starts to get rough. And then day 3, you're just like, I've lived a hard life. I'm giving this up, okay? Life is too short to not eat my cookies. You know, and I agree with that. I mean, life is too short to not eat the cookies. Live bold, eat the cookie. You know. But my point about that being, you know, not living for now, living on what happened yesterday. Now, that brings us to an interesting realm of discussion when we're talking about Job's wife. And this is huge, okay? Because hear what I'm saying. Maybe you are suffering because God brought up your name in conversation. You hear what I just said? It's possible that you are suffering in the situation you're suffering because God brought up your name in conversation. Kudos to you. And I also want to throw out a little bit side thing there. Maybe you're suffering because you're standing next to Job. You see, Job's wife lived in his shadow. I really hope you get what I'm saying here. Because she had to suffer because she was standing next to righteous Job. Not because she was righteous, she was too close to him. She got caught up. See, she lost her kids too. She lost her wealth too. She lost her family's prestige too. She lost a healthy husband too. She went through a lot too. Okay, and like I'm not trying to downplay that at all. We're all going to go through lots of stuff in different ways and different times. But the problem with her wasn't that she was suffering for being righteous. She was suffering because she was standing next and too close to a righteous person. So she had to suffer because of him. She suffered what's called collateral damage. Collateral damage, that's it. It wasn't something that she deserved or earned, or she couldn't stand in pride and say, well, at least I've got my integrity. Because she didn't have her integrity. He had integrity, and she wanted him to give it away. She suffered not for her righteousness, he suffered because of righteousness. And likewise, the blessings are the exact same. See, she was blessed. Why was she blessed? Because Job was blessed. She suffered because he suffered. She was blessed because he was blessed. She lived off of his blessings. She didn't earn them. She leached off of them. She lived in his shadow. And you might say, well, what's your point? I'm getting there. It's like reading a good book. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. You got to take your time and get to the ending. You wouldn't just turn to the last chapter and read it, would you? Would you? You wouldn't do that, would you? All right, because I tell you what, there's a special place in hell for people who talk in movie theaters and for people who skip the whole book and just read the end. I'm telling you. All right, getting back on this, okay? She lived off his blessings. She didn't earn them. So who's bringing up your name and why? That's a very important question because in times of suffering, we often say, I'm Job. But what if in times of suffering, it's because you're Job's wife? Is God bringing up your name in praise or is Satan bringing up your name in praise? Eesh. Eesh. You are either being used by Satan or God right now in the lives of others. In the lives of your family, in the church, you are either being used by Satan or God. It's a sad truth that I've had to come to realize because sometimes my mouth is being used as Satan's plaything, and sometimes my mouth is being used as God's tool. From the same mouth comes both blessings and curses. So what legacy are you creating today in your family? Stop and reflect on this for just a minute. What kind of a legacy are you leaving to your family? What are you creating? What legacy are you creating today in your church? Are you forgiving people? Are you encouraging them? So let's kind of tie some ideas here that I've been kind of toying around with. Blessings and troubles are going to come. Okay, all right. And you can either be a victim of circumstances, or you can establish a legacy. But either way, blessings and troubles are both going to come. So Job's wife lived in his shadow, and this is what I'm getting at with that. She never walked in what God had for her. She never walked in what God had for her. Job walked in what God had for him, which turned out to be a lot of troubles and problems, but at least he was walking with God. She, on the other hand, nope, no go. She never walked in what God had for her. And there's this idea, I hear younger people especially say this, I don't want to get too serious with God right now, because what if he asked me to do something I don't want to do? I hear younger people say that all the time. And the thing is, you're still going to have problems and blessings that come up either way. They could be pointless or purposeful. Either way, it's going to happen, you know. And so she walked, and she never walked in what God had for her. Even if there's problems that come from it, it's better to walk in what God has for you. So what's the result of this? That Job's legacy was respected by God himself. That's a big statement. And that's good. But her legacy, what was her legacy? Her legacy was irrelevant. Her legacy was irrelevant, not even worth bringing up in the conversation. We all have a legacy. Right now, you are creating a legacy. It's like when you're training a dog. Did you know that everything you do is training your dog? You are either going to let your dog do whatever it's doing, like pee in the house or whatever, and just kind of let it go. That's training your dog. When your dog whines for something and you get up to let it outside, you're training it to whine for something. Everything you're doing, you're always training your dog. All the time, 24/7. It's a never-ending process, and when you start caving on your discipline toward your dog's attitude will start caving. It's the same thing with our legacy. Our legacy isn't something we did in the past. It's not something we hope to do in the future. It's what you're doing right now. Well, if I had more money, if I had more time, those things are irrelevant. What matters is what you do with what you have. That's the legacy. You're not going to stand before God and say, look, I had it rough, and I didn't have as much as this person had. God's going to say, but I gave you something. What did you do with what you had? I have seen powerful prayer women who were confined to their beds in sickness. It's not what you have, it's how you use it. I always ask myself, is my legacy irrelevant? In our culture, we're told to watch out for number one, watch out for yourself. But if you do that, you're robbing yourself of God's blessing. Job didn't watch out for number one, and it cost him, but it was a price worth paying. And Job's friends were no better than the wife, by the way. I told you I was going to bring him back up. I told you that, right? Here they are. They're no better than Job's wife. They were just louder. Whereas she gave him the silent treatment for the rest of the book, they had the I'm holier than you, I've got all the answers for the rest of the book. Until finally God intervenes and shuts them up. And here's the thing about Job's friends. They saw an opportunity for prestige. Let's look at Job 4:12, for instance. A word was brought to me in secret. My ears caught a whisper of it. He's trying to explain to Job how he knows what's wrong and how Job has missed it. And what does he use as his argument? I have special revelation. I have special knowledge that has eluded you. A figure came and visited me in my dreams. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, yeah, that's a ghost or a demon, buddy. You need to pray and get right with Jesus. That's not something good. Yeah. So he has his little thing here. Oh, I'm so much better than you, Job. I have this secret knowledge. They weren't righteous. Job's friends weren't righteous. They weren't wise, but they wanted the prestige of being both. So now that Job has weakened from his glorious estate, they see the opportunity to swoop in and get a position that they didn't really earn. And you see a lot of times something similar happens in churches where people will go to church even for years. Meanwhile, they mirror Job's friends and Job's wife more than they actually mirror Job. It's a dangerous place to be in. They don't intercede for others. They have ambition for power, and they want that position. I tell you, I was at a leadership thing with the district, I think it was last week or the week before, and one thing that Mike Dickinson was talking about was he said that you don't want to give the position to somebody who wants the position. It's a certain character trait that's there. When you have somebody who has that ambition for the position, there's usually something wrong. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy what you're doing and you can't desire to get... You see what I'm saying? I'm talking about that ambition that exists. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I need that power. I need to have that ultimate power of the dark side of the Force. It's just not really something that you want to look for in a good leader. Some of the best leaders are people who have actually no desire to be the cat's meow. They have answers, but they don't have heart. They live without integrity, but they want to tell you everything that you're doing wrong. It's okay for them to gossip and complain and nitpick and do all kinds of stuff, but man, if you don't do everything right, if you don't wear the right clothes, you listen to the right music, do all the things right, they're sure to tell you about it. They don't make time to love and serve, whether we're talking about God and people. And it's interesting because I throughout years, I've noticed this kind of recurring nightmare where the Christians who think that they're strongest are the weakest. And they spend all of their time doing stuff like gossiping instead of encouraging one another and serving. I don't know how that works out. I just don't get it. The people who think that they're the strongest in the faith tend to be the weakest. I guess maybe another way of saying that is simply that they suffer poorly. Job suffered well in that he suffered for something that he did. Meanwhile, Job's wife suffered poorly. They missed it. And I want to have a little bit of an abrupt end here, because I think today's message is one of those messages that calls for reflection. Because I don't want to be in the church for 50 years and be offended about everything. I don't want my legacy to be, hey, I did some good things in years past with pastors and with other churches. I don't want that to be my legacy. I want to now be doing something. See what I mean? I look at this and I ask the question, am I becoming Job or am I becoming Job's friends? Am I becoming Job's wife? I would hate that. Well, I'm going to say my little spiel and then turn bitter and just ignore you for the rest of the story. I don't want that. And I think there's something inside of us that has a tendency to go to one of these extremes. Either you're going to be the know-it-all friend, has all the answers, or you're going to be the bitter wife, or you're going to be righteous Job. And I sure don't want to be those first two groups. So what legacy are you building today? This is the abrupt end I want to bring to today's message. What legacy are you building today? And this isn't something we're going to raise our hands and answer out loud. I want you to think about this. This is something that should weigh on our minds and on our hearts and our spirits. We're in our church's 100-year anniversary. This is a big issue. What legacy are we building today? Not just as a church, but as individuals. What legacy are we building? What is God saying about you today? What is God saying about this church today? What legacy are we building?